All right. Hello,
Hello, my
everybody.
friend.
Hello, Rahim. So, everyone, thank you for joining us today. I am actually going to pass the mic to Rahim in just a second to allow him to introduce himself and to talk about what we're going to be talking about today and why we're going to be talking about it. But first of all, just so that you all know, Rahim is a very, very, very close friend of mine, someone who I respect and value and cherish as a friend, as someone that I look up to, and also as a light in this world. Him and I have been working, and he's been teaching me so much, and we've been learning together for the past several weeks. It's been like months now. And we're going to start the conversation and have this conversation. The name of this transition, politics of the moment is way on politics and the conversation that needs to be had. And there is no one who I have a greater honor and trust in than the soul that is next to me on the screen. And so, Rahim, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing this idea. Thank you for bringing your wisdom and your light. And I'm going to let you take it from here.
Oh my God, I cannot tell you how excited I am to be having this conversation with you in this moment at this incredibly challenging transition that we are going through, and to talk about how we can understand our place in it and to form the difference that we want to make in the world as we do that. And so, you watched the debate last night, I assume. Yeah, what was your experience of that?
I did. So first, I want to name, just before Raheem and I got on here, that there's a conversation that we're both very nervous to have.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something where I switch between like willing myself to have hope in this world and then hopelessness. And I try so hard, and like being completely vulnerable, I try so hard to be a light and spread goodness in the world. And sometimes I have a really, really, really hard time finding it and seeing it. And so I put reminders like RBG up here, around to remind me that there is light and there is legacy. And so my experience of last night um, was about what I expected it to be. Maybe it's worse than what I expected it to be. Um, I'm I'm confused. I'm for the first time in my life like angry and allow myself to be angry, and that's actually not something I've ever allowed myself to be, is angry. And more than anything, I want to create connection. And I look at what happened last night, and I look at the division in our country, and compassion is such a value of mine. And recently I've been having a really hard time finding compassion. And that is what my experience is of last night.
And you mean by finding compassion for Trump, finding compassion for Trump supporters, finding compassion for what?
I think finding compassion for people who have different views than mine. I think finding compassion for some of the statements that were made last night, finding compassion for people who do not see the racial injustice, finding compassion for the people who do not see and value women and our place in this world, um, finding compassion for people who don't tell the truth, and or maybe I should say don't maybe speak the truth that they believe, but I don't see it as truth, and I have a hard time bridging that gap.
Yeah. So, what's interesting, one of the cool things that has happened in my life is I'm both a financial advisor as well as a meditation teacher. So my feet are very much on both sides of the bridge. And so I get to see kind of the long-term drivers of what occurs in the economy that creates the kind of inequality and the problems that we have in this kind of an economy, as well as understanding kind of the long-term view of the arc of humanity, right? And so the arc of humanity right now, just to start with that, because I think it's really powerful to get a sense of where we are. Because if we have a sense of where we are, if we have a sense of our position, then we can have the capacity to understand and to choose what we're going to do about it. And so to think through where we are in humanity over the last several thousand years, humanity's reason for being is production. We have been intending to create stuff, whether that's cars or tools or something, something, something that we can use. And today that's changing. Humanity is transitioning from the age of production, the age of the human being as a tool, to the age of consciousness, where we are no longer needed to produce the basic materials of our livelihoods. But what that means is that for those people at the bottom end of that spectrum, they are going to lose their jobs first. They are going to lose their livelihoods. They're going to lose whatever it is that they did, because their jobs are being created, their jobs are being taken over by robots. And so today you have many different United States of Americas, and really many different countries, right? You have a United States of America of Ohio, the 8,000 person town where where a factory shut down, and 6,000 people in that town lost jobs. That person's facts are completely different from the facts of someone that's working in a coastal town doing things that are thought work sorts of things. Those people's lives are completely separate, and there's no way that they can reconcile the understanding of the previous factory worker's job and that person who's never done anything really physical in their life.
Mm.
And so when I look at Trump, I look at Trump's speaking to those individuals and using what he calls the alternative facts. And it's not alternative facts, it's their facts, but it's not our facts. And so we are unable to understand things that are outside of our experience. We may be able to empathize with those things, but what Trump is doing is he is saying this is getting destroyed. And so this thing is getting destroyed, or rather, he is helping that destruction process along, right? Trump is coming in and he's saying, this is so bad that we have to completely destroy it to build something new.
Mm-hmm.
And his
And
supporters are
so,
going, yeah,
go ahead.
absolutely, we got to blow it up. And here we're over here, and we're the sustainers, the light workers, right? We're trying to sustain the light, and we're seeing it disappear. And we're like, we got to hold on to it. We got to fight for it. We got to do something because we have to save humanity. But each of us are a part of that structure. Each of us are part of that building that is being destroyed, called the age of production. And what we need to remember is that that's a beautiful dance. The God of destruction, the God of renewal, is Shiva. And Shiva's a scary figure, right? He's got matted hair, dreadlocks, goes around completely with unkempt clothes, right? Just terrible, scary figure, has no morality. But we have to remember that Shiva's consort is Parvati, that the death and destruction is also married to the beauty and the renewal. One of the things that is also miraculous to me is that the child of Shiva and Parvati is Ganesh. That Ganesh is the god of reason, of wisdom, and of wealth. And that as we allow the destruction to occur, and as we engage with the light of Parvati, the beauty of Parvati, what arises is Ganesh. But first, the destruction. So how do we do that?
What what you're saying, right? Because that's Hindu philosophy, right?
It's into philosophy, yeah.
And so, I mean, as you're talking, and I actually wrote about this the other day, because I was like, I look at nature and I believe that every lesson that we need as humans is in nature, right? Because God is nature, the universe is nature, we are of nature. And looking at the story of the phoenix, right, where the phoenix has to be completely destroyed, right, in order to be reborn from the ashes. And that's like the story that you're just telling me. And I even look at the forest fires, right? And the complete destruction and devastation that is happening. And simultaneously, as death is happening, some of the evolution of the seeds that are in the forest are only ignited with the heat of the fire.
Absolutely.
And so simultaneously, birth is happening as death and destruction are happening, right? There's the yin and the yang, if you want to go into Taoism and everything else. There's a yin and the yang that is constantly happening. And so how do we allow ourselves, and this is the dance that I think you're talking about, is how do we allow ourselves to see destruction as empaths, as light workers, as people who see and feel it to the deepest of our core? How do we acknowledge destruction? How do we accept destruction, knowing that there's also beauty? And what's the balance of fighting, right, or standing for something, and the balance of letting go?
Yes. I think the magic of that is being a witness. I think the magic of that is knowing what it takes for another human being, for another life to be alive, and to be in honor of that, whatever that takes. And so we can choose to watch, we can choose to be with this dance that we're experiencing. And we know that Biden's not the answer. We know that Biden can't fix this. We know that Bernie can't fix this. We know that Warren can't fix this. We know that no one can fix this, that this is the trajectory of human being. And that eventually that this age must come to an end. And it's going to come to the end spectacularly nastily. It has to. That's what happens in these kinds of ages. And the reason for that is that there isn't enough. There isn't enough for people at the bottom end of it. And the bottom end of it's 50 to 60% of the people. So it's natural that they get angry. It's natural that they say, you told me, you promised me, you said that this was going to happen and it's not happening, right? That was the promise we made to them. We told them after the Second World War, after the last time that we went through this kind of devastation, that if you worked, if you used your hands, that you would have a way into the middle class. That is no longer so. It is never going to be so again, not through production. And so, as light workers, it's so important for us to know that that's the trajectory and to be a witness of that, to allow the destruction to occur, and knowing that I call it touching palms as we share energy together, as we feed each other, that we can be with destruction, but not of the destruction. And that's the light of Pravati. That's the formation of Ganesh. That's the arising of wisdom.
And so, like, as you're saying this, right, and I want to make sure that everyone listening, because this isn't about politics. It is, right? And it isn't. This is about how do we move together as humanity, right? How do we hold one another as brother and sisters? How do we form and unite in a very divided world? And just like money, right? It's never about the money. It's about what the money triggers in each of us. It's a spotlight into our wounds. Politics, right? It triggers us, right? And more than that, it's a spotlight into our wounds, into our securities, into our lack and scarcity mindset, right? Every single time, into what we need to be healed and the separateness. right? And so as you're talking, and this is a question I have because like it is so up here, right? This idea of, okay, you know, as spiritual beings having a human experience, we can be, right? We can choose to be witness and we can choose to have the 10,000 foot view. And there's also this realm, this physical realm, this human experience that we also have. And so what is the balance of witness, right? And I even have, right? And I'm like thinking about RBG as she's up here, who like devoted her life to change, right? To progress, to fighting, to speaking up and sharing her voice for those who didn't have one, fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves, right? Standing up when no one else would stand up. And so what is the balance of witnessing and then also standing up for what you believe in and holding that also to be true?
So let's talk about RBG and the Supreme Court and kind of the whole purpose of that and kind of where we are in the state of our democracy. So if you look at the democracy itself, there are significant issues that are nonpartisan, right? The way that we vote, one person, but that also means that in states where there are overwhelmingly one party, that means many people on the other side's vote just doesn't count. And once you've won that state, right, the rest of the people who voted in that state also didn't really count in some ways. That vote itself is broken. There are other places in the world where the vote is different. For instance, in Ireland, they vote one time, but they can order who they vote for. So they say, I want to vote for this person once. If that person doesn't win, then the second choice of that vote comes into play. Another thing is example is campaign finance, right? The amount of money that we spend on elections together is just insane. What RBG was looking at the structure of society itself, the structure of democracy itself, right? How do we update democracy so that we don't have a permanent underclass? How do we update democracy so half of the country doesn't earn 70% of what the other half of the country earns? These are not problems of partisanship. These are problems of our democracy. These are problems that we are facing all together, that the structure of society does not work. And we can work on those issues together. So we can espouse our own issues. I'm a Muslim man, right? I'm not a Hindu. So after 9/11, one of the experiences I had was that I went to a black man and I said, so what do you do when you're stopped by the police? And he said, I shut off the car. I shut off the car, right? And then I put my hand beyond my steering wheel onto my dashboard. I never reach for my licensing and my all of that kind of stuff ahead of time. I want to make sure the police officer knows that they're safe before they come and see me, because I don't want to get shot. And when we look at the consequences of those kinds of accommodations that people have to make, and it's not just black men that have to make those kinds of accommodations, at this point, the poor white people who never felt like they had to do that are also needing to do those kinds of things too, not with the police, but with other areas of their life. So when we talk about the areas that are real problems, we're talking about a change in the currency. And I'm gonna go off of what you mentioned earlier, right? About money. It's so triggering, but money itself is changing in this age of consciousness. It's moving away from the dollar, it's moving away from the euro, it's moving away from the yen, and it's moving towards dignity. And we as light workers have the opportunity to see the dignity issues in those that we disagree with, in those that we would want to fight with. And as we look at the dignity issues of the democracy itself, and we can reach across the aisle and deal with those issues together, then we have the opportunity to recreate something. The dangers is when we feel so terrible about the accommodations that we have to make in life that we can no longer see the dignity of the other. And that's the hallmark of the age of consciousness. It is the understanding of how to work towards that dignity, not just for ourselves, but for life itself. And so, how do you do that on a day-to-day basis, right? That's the question. How do I work today to breathe life into those that I feel are taking it away from me? And as we are willing to do that, as we create the high enough frequency, as we get away from fear and anger and desperation, and we raise our consciousness to willingness. Willingness is about a 310 on the consciousness scale. The fears and the angers and all of that, those are all below 100. Courage is 200. And that's the bridge. If we can allow ourselves, if we can push ourselves to create the courage, pull ourselves into being willing to give each other dignity, then we have a chance. I don't know if I lost you. You're frozen, I think. Come back, Jillie. Hello. I am sure you'll be back in a second. So in the meantime, the danger is our bodies. The danger is that we are feeling so hopeless, so scared, so alone that we don't want to dance with anybody. That even those people that are on our side, even those people that are with us, we have to fight with. Because that's the feeling that we have in our body. And so my invitation to you, each of us, is just to feel that, just to allow that, just to know that that feeling is right to be felt in this moment, but you don't have to get stuck in the feeling. That you can go beyond that and you can reach into courage, you can reach into willingness, you can reach into giving yourself and giving others the experience of dignity that we all require as we enter the age of consciousness. And by doing that, we'll be able to create a new world together. It'll take decades, but it will happen.
I'm back.
Oh my God, you missed so much. I just kept
Did
going and going and going.
I thought that at first I thought it was you, and I was like, dang it, I don't know how to
Yeah,
continue on with it. Did the live stream continue?
the live stream continued.
Oh, amazing. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
we
so good.
didn't miss a thing. It was great. It was
Amazing.
great. You
Okay.
should. So the question really is, how do we reach higher?
Mm-hmm.
How do we reach into courage? How do we reach into the willingness to give to another? And
Mm-hmm.
how are you doing that? What are your practices that you do to be able to increase your vibrational frequency enough so that you can have the courage for your day, that you can
Mm-hmm.
have the willingness to connect with another?
So I think that one, it's recognizing the stories that I have, right, and the judgments that I have around a person, right? And so I'll use this as an example. We were staying with somebody, and they were only watched Fox News, and they used the N word pretty regularly,
Mm-hmm.
and um, not something that I do, not something that I support. And so at first it was division. right? It was, they're wrong, I'm right, right? They are racist, I am not, which, you know, we are all racist. And I took a pledge to be an anti-racist. And then all of a sudden I realized, I asked myself the question, is this forging connection? And if connection is one of my highest values, right, then I need to live in alignment with my values. So what if they've had an experience that I just don't know about that created, right, their beliefs and their biases and their everything else, right? And so I said, okay, what would create connection? What would forge connection? Having a conversation, confronting them, right? And
Yes.
saying, hey, I'm really nervous to have this conversation with you. I'm actually very uncomfortable right now. And I'm wanting to enter a conversation about something that was said the other night that made me uncomfortable. Are you willing to go there with me? Those were the exact words that I used with this, 70 something year old white man.
Yeah.
And he said, sure. And so I was like, okay, well, this was said and this made me really uncomfortable. And I was wondering what your prior experiences were that have you using these words and these phrases and the beliefs that you have about, he was talking about Chicago. And so I was like, I would love to hear what's happened in your past to bring you there. And I also want to share what my perspective is. Are you willing to hear that?
Mm.
And so he shared his perspective and, he shared all of the things that he's experienced and, apologized and said, actually, he went into this whole thing. And then after he was done, I said, okay, I would like to share my perspective with you and what I heard. And so, because it wasn't just about him, it was also about me, right? And it was also about us creating conversation. And even if we couldn't agree, meeting each other there. And so that's how I deal with it. With family who has different political opinions, right? It's coming from a place of curiosity and saying, hey, I'm really just wondering why you feel this way. And I'd love to share my perspective as well, because I want to meet, I don't want us to disconnect. I
Yes.
want us to come together. And that's how I deal with it. And that's how I do with it on a daily basis, and it is uncomfortable and I don't like it. And I have to give myself pep talk after pep talk. I have to rely on my support system, right? But when I look at my value of connection, I would be doing myself a disservice and my life a disservice, right, if I didn't honor that value.
Yes. So I brought a prop today.
Amazing.
You know what this is?
Hot sauce?
You know what kind of hot sauce it is?
Tabasco?
That's right. This is a Tabasco bottle. How'd you know it's a Tabasco
I'm
bottle?
not really sure.
But you knew, right? You
Yeah,
like
I did.
really knew.
Yeah, I
Like
did.
you didn't have to know, like it didn't have to have a label on it. Didn't have you know it's a Tabasco bottle.
I think I know where you're going with this, and I think it's really good.
Yeah. So you knew exactly who this person was, but you took the labels off.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't say he's a racist, so I can't connect with him. You didn't say this is hot sauce, so I can't engage with it. Right? You said, look, it's a bottle. It has some liquid in it. Let me taste it. Let me see where this goes. How much of it can I taste? How much life can I stand? So much of the time. So there's a gentleman who I watched a debate yesterday with my daughter, 16 years old, right? And my daughter calls them an anarchist, calls themselves an anarchist communist. And so because of that label that they have determined that they are, that's the way they are willing to engage with society. I'm an anarchist communist, so I have to engage in this particular way. So on Facebook, someone commented to them, well, I'm a libertarian, so I can accept your philosophy. I just won't agree with it. Right. And as a libertarian, that label said that he was going to act a certain way to them. But there wasn't a connection. There wasn't a coming together. And when we take off the labels, we know it's hot sauce. We know it's Tabasco, but now we can engage with it. And that's the power of being in the moment. When we haven't predetermined what life is going to be like, we can just dance with it. And we can allow the dance of destruction to occur and be with the beauty of it. But we got to remove the labels.
Mm. It's so good. And what I also just heard in that is we have to be willing to be wrong about the person.
Yes.
We have to be willing to be wrong about our labels and wrong about our judgments, right? And I think for me, I've learned to celebrate being wrong. I celebrate being wrong because every time I'm wrong, it usually means that my mind is opened that much more.
And when you do that, when you actually engage with the person, that is the act of giving each other dignity.
Mm.
That is the act of creating connection in the new world that we all wish.
Like
That's the
Michelle.
currency
Mm.
that we are building up to a critical mass.
Mm. So good. So good. And Michelle Obama says it's hard to hate close up,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so
Yeah, exactly.
you go, girl.
Yes.
Yeah. And what that means is have a conversation, right? And so something that I want to give everyone is it's okay to feel uncomfortable. It's okay to be afraid. It's also okay to be wrong. And when you give yourself all those things and realize that fear doesn't mean I shouldn't have it, it actually means that's probably a good idea to have it, right? That fear only happens, right? Courage only happens when fear is present.
Yes.
And so engage in a conversation that someone with different political views than you, or someone of a different race or different background or from a different country, right? Engage with someone who's different from you, come from a place of curiosity, right? And say, I'm nervous to have this conversation and I want to create connection. Will you enter it with me?
Lovely. Thank you, Jillie. What a wonderful conversation this has been. How do you feel as we're completing this now?
Hopeful.
We have reached high.
Hopeful.
Love it. Thank you.
And thank you. And so this is something, you know, that needs to happen, right? Like this consciousness, right? And engagement and connection, right? Is where, in this idea of currency based on dignity, this is something that we need to support the world in, and a conversation that we all need to have. And so this is something, Rahim, that I would love to invite you into conversation
I would
weekly
love
with
that.
me.
That'd be great. Let's do it.
Yeah. And so for everyone that's watching, guess what? It's okay if you have questions, and it's okay if you don't agree. And it's okay for you to name that and say, hey, like respectfully, right? Respectfully disagree, just like we can respectfully disagree, right? And we can understand where someone else is coming from, or attempt to understand where someone else is coming from. So these conversations are about bringing people together, right? These conversations are about creating connection, right? And evolving the world in a different way, right, than maybe some other people are doing. And so I encourage you to watch us. I encourage you to share, even if you don't agree, or if you have questions, right? And if you're like, I don't understand this at all, this is completely over my head, I've never heard of these concepts or whatever else, please ask, right? Because as Rahim and I are teachers, right? Rahim and I are humans, and we're souls, and we're light workers, and we are very human. And so the best way that this is going to help support hope and light in the world is through conversation, is through questions, is through clarification, right? So I encourage you to do that. And please post any questions that you would like us to continue on in conversation as well.
Thank you.
So, Rahim, is there anything else that you would like to add and finish with? I would like you to end it.
Absolutely. The most radical thing that we can do and be in this current moment is fully alive, fully ourselves, unperturbed by the circumstances of the moment. We can live in this dance of destruction and not be destroyed by it. We can be in the fire and not be burnt by it. The only way we do that is by touching palms, by doing it together. you can trust that will work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, we will be here same time next week. Please post your questions, support Rahim. All right, and keep an eye out. And we are so grateful to be on this planet touching palms with you.
Blessings.
Have a great rest of your day.